right. Well, we've just passed the 2 minute mark, so want to welcome everybody today to Triton Data Center office hours. Um, it's been a while since we've met, but appreciate everybody joining today. As you see on the screen, and as I mentioned in the chat, we're going to talk about learning from disasters, failures, and mistakes. My presentation is going to be pretty short. I'm just going to present a couple of use cases, one of them involving Triton, and then I want to hear from all of you, and we'll have a discussion about different situations and things like that. So we'll go ahead and get started. And then if you have questions, you can interrupt or um, type it in the chat, and we'll get them. And in fact, I have a question from somebody who may not be able to be online. So you know, just like if you have questions or something that happens after or before office hours, you can't make it. I'll try to compile a list of questions that people may have. So yeah, learning from disasters, failures, and mistakes. The first thing I wanted to show was some potentially dangerous commands, and there's safeguards, of course, in some of the operating systems in some of these, but the all famous sudo rm-rf, um, the root directory, removing all of your data. Like I said, I think like I know with like Ubuntu, right? It has like a warning that it will give you, but there's other versions of
Yeah, on a
Linux.
Lumos, that's completely safe.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people are still hesitant to try it, but according to the specification, when you're unlinking multiple objects, the order is undefined. So usually when you're recursively deleting a directory, it will go to the deepest object, remove those, and then like traverse up the tree. But because the specification explicitly states that the order is undefined, somebody at Sun decided we'll just make root first. Like if you issue that command, we're going to make the root directory the very first thing that gets processed. And then you get an error that says the directory is not empty, and then the entire operation fails after that.
Oh, good.
So yeah, you can actually run that on an Illumos-based system, and it will not damage the system at all.
Yeah, and like I said, there's safeguards in like you just mentioned in that, and that's the way in like Ubuntu and some it'll give you like a warning, right? Do you really want to do that?
Somebody,
Oh, go
could
ahead.
somebody other than me try that right now?
I'm not gonna try
Sorry.
it, but I mean, I
I
might.
can't bring my fingers to actually type that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I can tell you why in a little bit.
Um,
Actually, I did that before. So.
yeah, and I've done it. I've done it as a test on a few like a virtual machine. I've tested it just to see what happens. Of course, I went through with the warning and screwed it up, but it was just a throwaway machine. But I'm not sure. Like, there's other versions. Like we just talked about. Brian just mentioned the Illumos protection, and then there might be a version of Linux like Gen 2 or something where it's like it lets you, like, if you're really in root or something like that, that you're smart enough, you won't do this, and it might not have the warning. So but that may be across the board, there may be a warning. Dropping tables, right? So I have this just drop table important production table. So I've seen stories of people, I accidentally was dropped the production table. I was thought I was on staging or something like that. So that's one thing that I'm sure
Yeah,
mistakes people have made.
I've got two stories about that one. When I was at Amazon on Christmas Eve, somebody dropped an important database and took down the retail website,
Oh my gosh.
which is pretty bad. Um, and it was the person's like second day on the job. Um, the sad thing about that is that they ended up getting fired, and it wasn't even their fault because their onboarding buddy was the one who was guiding them through everything, and basically like told them what to do. Um, and as far as I know, the onboarding buddy didn't get fired, so like they handed someone else a bomb, and then the bomb went off, and like that person got chopped for it.
Wow. Yeah,
Um,
that's nuts.
but another time, I had a company that I worked at. all of a sudden, like one guy starts like running through the halls, like cursing at the top of his lungs. And we're like, dude, what just happened? And he's like, I just did drop table customer. Like, that was it. It was gone.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, and
so yeah, we
there's
had to pull that from the backup from the night before.
yeah, and there's no I'm not super familiar with every SQL implementation, but I think generally they don't have a warning, um, because once again,
Right.
if you're in root mode or a user with enough privileges, it's like you know what you're doing, you shouldn't type this, right? And so, um, and I mean, there's some cases where it may be recoverable, like if the data hasn't been overwritten and there's like a binary backup, but generally it's not a good thing to do. So please don't do that. Make sure you know where you are before you do that. Another one was like doing a redirect to the actual device. So I was reading about that where you could potentially like overwrite your entire physical device. There may be safeguards in place in operating systems for that. So, like I said, these are potentially dangerous, not necessarily
Yeah,
dangerous.
with that one, it's just like the permissions on the device itself.
Yeah.
Um, but um, you don't even have to like overwrite the entire disk to ruin that one. All you need to do is wipe your partition table, which is in like the first few bytes. Like, and then it's gone. You're doing like block level data recovery at that point.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So yeah, and then the chmod, so making every file potentially readable and writable by every user. Um, I've done things. I've used that command when like I'm using a virtual machine and I'm trying to figure out like problems with Apache, um, but I've never done it, in a mission critical situation. But sometimes it's using the wrong tool for the job. Um, Now the one I have below that curl a script into sudo bash. So a lot of installation things I've seen to install, like for instance, they have one for Node.js where you download the script and pipe it into sudo bash and execute it. Um, and so basically you're giving permission to a script that um, you haven't reviewed. It just literally downloads it and runs it. And if there's some sort of problem, like you have a man in the middle attack, or this script is just a bad place, download, things like that, that can be potentially dangerous. And then the one at the bottom, the SDC on each node reboot, I only put this one here, and that's not the right full command, but we'll get into that in just a second. That one is, if you look in the documentation, it even mentions that this would reboot, for instance, every node from your Triton installation. They've added a thing for -A for it to be all nodes. So as it wouldn't work like it's placed there.
Yeah,
Currently.
the original command was not very good about validating parsing the entire command line. So it was supposed to be that if you wanted to do a specific node, you would use like -n the node name. And there's some pretty epic news articles out there that you can go read about Joyent's reboot of the US East 1 data center, where someone was intending to reboot a single node and they forgot the -n, and it just defaulted to doing all nodes instead.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So
mentioned
that one was kind of scary for me because like I had only been at Joyent for about a month at that point. And then like we were rebooting the East 1 data center unexpectedly. So like all customers are going to be down, and people start asking like, okay, so when is it going to recover? And then they're like, the correct question is, will it recover?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And then
yeah,
I mentioned
it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of if.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And I talk a little bit about that here as well, so we'll have a little bit more expand on that just a second. But yeah, I hope it's not me. Hope it's not me. Right? Just like you mentioned, that
yeah.
person that got fired or whatever. Like, I've heard of different situations where people, like, it was like a junior dev or something, and it was like, okay, this is a learning experience. Hopefully, that's the attitude
Yeah.
sometimes, rather than like just going for the nuclear option.
Right.
So as I mentioned earlier, did a little bit of research. Just I actually did this with our good friend ChatGPT. I just said, show me some disasters, and it has a cool structure where it gives you like the impact and things like that. So coming with a little bit older stuff for now. So 1990.
So these could be entirely hallucinated.
Or they could be hallucinated. But I did go and look them up a little bit further to verify. But yeah, it could be fed some bad data or somebody made something up. But so the first one was like a 1990 AT&T outage where a software bug caused their switches all to reset. Widespread service disruption. Outage lasted for 9 hours and affected 60,000 people. I still see things like 911 services going down for updates like this. So this is still something that hasn't been solved, right? Is network. This might have been POTS equipment, but now that we use more digital stuff, this happens with modern systems as well. But not 60,000 people, as big as AT&T was and is now. That's a small number of people. Y2K, we all have heard about Y2K. There was a lot of panic around it, but there was no totally major situations as far as I looked up. I think there probably was some things that happened around it, but nothing huge. The Knight Capital Group trading glitch. So this one was really bad. Knight Capital had developed like a really complicated automated trading system, and then they had a bug in their software, and erroneous trades were made automated a $440 million loss, and this basically killed their business. They were on the verge of bankruptcy but were acquired because of it. But they bet their business on this, and this is what happened. The one we just were talking about, the 2014 US East DC reboot. So mistyped command. Somebody was actually going to reboot some empty compute nodes.
The node was going to be decommissioned.
Yeah.
So they had evacuated all the compute nodes or the VMs on it, and they were ready to shut it down and wipe the disk. I think they had even run SDC factory reset on it, and they were ready to no, because that reboots it right away. I don't know, but I know he was decommissioning the node, and he issued the reboot command. The syntax parsing was not the best on it, and so it targeted everything instead of just that one node.
Yeah, and so basically typed it in, comes back. Every node is rebooting. The head node's rebooting, right? There is a bunch of stuff happening. So this whole system, is about to go down. And because this was something, a failure mode that, of course, they did not test for. Who wants to reboot a whole data center as a test? There was a lot of panic around, Brian, as you mentioned earlier. Not when it comes back up, is it going to come back online?
Right.
And so,
yeah.
But there was, thanks to some factors that they had implemented, not foreseeing this exact situation, but situations that might be similar, it was actually not too bad of an outcome, right? The system came back online. People were still upset, and it made some news.
Yeah. But like,
go ahead.
So all the compute nodes boot from the head node, right?
Yeah.
And we weren't sure that the head node was going to come back up because you have you've got Manatee in an HA situation, and so Manatee on the head node boots up, right? But it doesn't have its two peers, and so it should go into like a deposed non-active state. And if it's in a non-active state, then Canopy is not working. And if Canopy is not working, then Booter's not working. And if Booter's not working, things can't boot. And then you need Booter in order for the next two compute nodes to boot up so that you have, or at least one of them, so you can get up a second Manatee peer so that Manatee can actually come online. And I don't actually know how they resolved that situation at the time, or even if it particularly needed active resolving. But I do know that we had everything online in about 90 minutes. And part of the reason why it took so long is because there was a hardware issue that would cause like the BIOS to enumerate the NICs incorrectly. And when it was only, rebooting a machine or two at a time, wasn't that big a deal. Something might get hung up and, somebody would have to like get on the KVM console and manually reboot it. But when you had like 100 of those nodes that got stuck like that was like kind of a big backlog, and so most of the effort that went into recovering that was just going to each of those nodes and making sure that they rebooted correctly. But most of the data center was online in like 15 minutes, which is like crazy.
Yeah, very crazy.
You can't reboot all of AWS and have it online in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So like it showed us something about like the resiliency of Triton, that
exactly.
it could be recovered so quickly. I always had the viewpoint of like, you don't really understand a system until you understand its failure modes. Like if you understand a system that's operating the way it is described as operating, then you only know it to a limited degree. Because things can and will go wrong.
Right.
And when things go completely off the rails, that's when you need to understand what's really happening so that you can pick it up and put it back on the rails.
Yeah, and there's been outage, and of course the people, on top of the fear of it, not maybe not coming back, is that there's outages, extended outages that have ruined companies, or the people, customers lost faith in the business. And so I think even Joyent.com was, I think, deployed in US East, so like Joyent.com was also down
Yeah.
at the time. But there's also a video Brian Cantrell has where he talks. He actually has like chat logs and stuff. He talks about this actually kind of in depth a little bit. So I'll link to that at some point if you want to go watch that. That just has a little bit more detail about what was the discussions were going on and things like that. But like we said, learning from that, there were some precautions. I think, Brian, you just said we looked at SDC on each node and they rewrote a bunch.
Yeah, I just looked at the commit, and it was completely rewritten from the ground up. And there was like 3 or 4 different issues that were all like taken care of together along with it. So let's see here. Tools 490 SDC on each node re-architecture, which included SDC on each node should require a command in a single argument, because it used to be that you could have the command unquoted and then just like any other arguments there, like an unbounded number of arguments would just be like joined together and then passed as the command. And that was part of what went wrong there, is that because it was an unbounded number of like arbitrary arguments, it got confused about whether or not those host names were supposed to be part of the command.
Yeah.
But with the way the command was written, it actually it skipped over the validation of those bare words instead of throwing a syntax error. And then like it should validate the node list before execution, because before, like, you could give it a list of bad nodes and it would try to execute on them and then fail afterwards. And then the big one, SDC on each node should not default to all nodes, because that was the default before, is that a command would execute everywhere, and then if you didn't want it to be everywhere, you had to explicitly narrow the scope of it. And so that was changed to you have to explicitly pass a scope. minus n for specific node list, minus c for all compute nodes but not the head node. Those two were already there. But then now if you want all nodes, you have to explicitly pass minus a.
Yeah. And funny thing, this is actually the 27th is I think it's 27th is like the 10th anniversary of
Yeah,
this.
on Monday is the 10th anniversary of when that happened.
Yeah. So topical. So yeah, that's the 10th anniversary of that. But it good thing that came out of it, like you said, is we found they're able to find some things. I think this was about a year before, almost exactly a year before I joined Joyent. So I mean, I heard about it and Hacker News and all that, but yeah, it's great. It's great that things came back online and they were able to do some things to make it even better and not have that situation happen on accident so easily.
Yeah.
So
And the result of that was not at all like what happened at Amazon. Um, like everybody jumped in and was like, um, the person who did it was like, kind of understandably freaking out, but like people told him like, don't worry about it. Like it happened. We're just gonna focus on recovery right now. Like, don't even like try to second guess like what you did, like what you might have done wrong. Like it doesn't matter.
yeah,
Like what happened happened, and
it's done.
um, yeah, we are all going to jump in and like get this thing recovered. Um, we'll do like postmortem analysis later on, um, and that postmortem analysis that happened revealed like, yeah, this tool is actually implemented like extremely poorly. Um, it's like a gun with a barrel pointed in both directions, and if you pull the trigger, like, yeah, you're gonna get shot also. Um, so like it wasn't his fault at all. Just like passing a syntax error.
Yeah,
Um, the program should have caught that as a syntax error and returned an error. I actually spent a bit of time recently trying to figure out like exactly how whatever command he did resulted in rebooting all nodes, because it seems like it should have tried to execute like hostname reboot on every node, which, because the hostname of the node he was trying to reboot is not a valid command on any system, like it should have just returned an error. So like um it was like by far an edge case that he had gotten himself into. Um and so it was very easy to see like this was definitely not his fault, um, for using a command that was designed so dangerously. Um, so yeah, we got the rewrite out of it, and it's been like much safer, more reliable, and less prone to error after that.
yeah. Because on the video that Brian had, he actually he redacted part of the command in that chat log. So that's why I was like, oh, what is the exact command? So, but yes, there's
Right.
some great, like I said, some things that came out of it, and I think hearing about the way it was handled was also great because yeah, just like thinking about firing the person right away or whatnot. It's really about checking processes at that point, and figuring out like how do we
Right.
prevent this from happening again. So yeah, that's there's more to learn on that, and like I said, the resiliency of Triton was shown there, or at the time it was Smart Data Center, I believe it was before the rename. And then just a couple.
Yeah, it was actually even before it was open sourced.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it was before it was open source. So, but yeah, so that was some learnings that we get to see the benefit of, um, in using Triton today. Then just a couple of quick ones I wanted to mention. The big Facebook outage, where they basically, there was a configuration change on the backbone routers, um, global outage of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Um, Services were down for about 6 hours. What was interesting about that one was they had like their ID system to actually get in the building and things like that were relying on this system as well. So since they couldn't get in remotely to fix this, they needed physical access to the building, and that system was down. So that's just like an interesting thing of like separation of concerns. Like they basically had, this cascading failure because they had so many systems relying on this particular backbone. and so that just made it more complicated for them to fix it. There's a lot of information about that one. And then the other one I wanted to mention was just the one that happened a week or two ago, the Unisuper deletion. So um, a employee inadvertently triggered a command to delete some data stored in Google's cloud services. They had a backup. It was like supposed to be in multiple regions, right? So it was duplicated across 2 cloud regions. This regional separation was effectively virtual because both regions lost copies due to an internal Google error. And there was no external disaster recovery facility in place. I believe that they did have some sort of backup to this, so it took about, I forgot the duration, but it took them a
Yeah,
while
they
to
had
get back
offline
up.
backups.
Yeah, they had some offline backups. So, um, but this was news because it was like that internal Google error. It was like, hey, Google is this big company, and they told us they have separation of concerns, and we thought we were in multi-region and things like that, and apparently that wasn't true. So, so that was a big thing. They were offline for quite some time, and that was people needed to access their retirement funds, and it was bad. And so Google's gotten some
Yeah.
publicity about that, and negative publicity. But obviously, people will still continue to use GCP, and hopefully they'll fix that particular error. I'm sure they've already tried to work
And
on it.
luckily, it was just the like the fund management software.
Okay, so it wasn't like the actual banking or.
Right, like the money didn't disappear, just
Okay,
like
yeah.
all the software that they used to manage the money. So yeah, it would have been quite a bit worse if the money disappeared along with it.
So yeah,
Like that other one, like $400 million loss kind of
yeah,
thing.
like actually just traded away a bunch of money or customers' money. So yeah, I just wanted to mention those, just kind of as some examples. But I really wanted to hear from the crowd here. So maybe some stories that you have, a mistake you might have made, or that you've been a part of that you learned something from it. So if everybody if you have something, just go ahead and jump in, and we'll love to hear
So
that.
I'm going to lead. I've been
Okay.
waiting to tell my story for a long time
Of
now.
course. Okay.
No, actually, that was one of the reasons we had this discussion. I was thinking about this. This is probably a month or two ago when we were thinking
Yeah.
ideas for different talks. But like, so I started this company, MNX. It was like 2005 or something like that, and we didn't get our first customer until 2006. By the way, fortunately, I had a job, and but I get a call from a customer working with them, and in 2006, I thought I knew a lot, right? I was pretty good at what I did. Turns out I'm not, actually. It took me a long time to realize that, but in 2006, I thought I knew a lot. And customer writing the script, doing something, months go by, I need to make some changes to it. And well, let me see what I did here. I commented out the variable at the top of the script, but like 100 lines later, it was like find/variable name exec rm. There might have been an R there as well, for all I know. And so I get a call like 3 days later from the customer. They're like, "Hey, website's down." I'm like, "Oh, that sucks." I get in the console, see what's going on. But most of the website was still serving because it was all in memory, right? Like it was cached content and open file handles and things like that. Just some pages weren't. And I didn't know for sure if it was me that caused the issue. So I, of course, had to take an image of the disk and tear it apart and find my script and realize, yeah, that was me that commented out to a variable name that then, yeah, and it was just a terrible script anyhow. Like it was, it was terribly written. But yeah, I caused the outage and deleted all their data. Good news though, they were a customer of ours for 12 years after that
Oh gosh,
because I told them it was my fault.
Whew. Yeah, honesty, the best policy, right?
Yeah, I was like, and I'm just starting out and like, oh crap, I just destroyed all your data. And they had no backup, by the way. So that was a whole nother issue, but.
Wow.
And they kept me as a consulting. And then, matter of fact, I think I talked to that person today, randomly, but
Yeah,
Wow.
I know there was a software installer that had that same bug in it, where it was like um, like install point / directory name.
Jasper says
And it
Steam.
would do like rm minus rf, you know, install point / directory name. And both of those variables were empty. And so gone.
Yep, yep. That one was my most memorable one. I mean, I've made, countless, not too many data destructive decisions, but like, many, many mistakes. But that was my best data destruction.
Yeah, I've had
data destruction as a
2
service.
times that someone has come to me and said, I ran SDC on each, or I ran SDC factory reset on my head node and rebooted it. Like, how fucked am I? And in one case, I was able to undestroy the pool. So with ZFS, when you destroy zpool, it just marks it as destroyed and then otherwise doesn't touch it. So you can actually go in and like with SmartOS, boot no import, and then issue the ZFS command to show destroyed unimported pools, and it gives the list there, and then you can actually import it after that and then like flag it as not destroyed, and then reboot the system and it just came up, and that was nice. That one was quick and easy. The second time someone did that, I was like, oh, easy, we'll just go in and like undelete the pool, no problem. Well, they also had an answers.json on their USB key, so that when they did the factory reset, it rebooted and it started doing an automatic installation, which included setting up a new pool on the disks there. And so that wiped out the previous pool that was in place, and like at that point everything was gone. So we went through the process of doing a like a manual reconstruction of the head node, and we had a little bit of prep time, but overall I think we got it mostly recovered in about 4 hours, and then we needed to restore the image API images. We had the list of all of them in Manatee because they had an HA setup, and so their data was fine on these 2 other nodes. And so we had the list of all the images that were there, but then on disk they were not there. And so I wrote a program that would compare what's on disk with what is in the image API index, and for any that were missing, go like fetch the original image from the upstream servers and pull that down and put it back on disk where it's supposed to be. And then after that, image API doesn't know the difference. So that ran overnight, and then by the next day, everything was back to normal. So that was another like almost complete melt, or well, I mean, it was a complete meltdown of that system, and we were able to recover back to a functioning state, which was nice. They initially thought like the data center is just nuked, and like the machines that were running, but stuff like Portalan would start to fail as like machines reboot or like caches expire or whatever. Machines reboot being the VMs, because if a compute node were to reboot, like not having a head node at that point, like the system wouldn't be able to boot at all. So there was somebody like trying to make contingency plans of like, how do we convert this, this Triton data center to like a fleet of standalone SmartOS systems, just so that things can continue to boot and we can limp along. But yeah, we were able to fully recover and get them back online. So that was pretty relieving to be able to do that.
Has anybody else got some juicy stories?
Sure, I can provide one.
Oh, you go first.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So this story comes from it's two database stories that are conjoined in a weird way. So bear with me through this ridiculousness. Probably 15 to 20 years ago, we were doing wireless deployment on my campus, and we needed a basically web database or a web thing to let us write down where are all the access points, what are they, etc. And we hired undergraduate students to go build it, and they went and built it, and it was built on basically CGI bin, Perl, and Postgres. I pointed at that stack 20 years ago and said, this is a pretty decent thing to build on. And the upside is that the good news is basically you don't have to throw away your code every 3 years because Perl 5 hasn't changed in 20. Anyway,
Right.
the challenge here came when one day late in my career, my supervisor at the time comes to me and says, the undergraduates deleted the entire wireless database. And it's sort of like, well, that seems bad, but I'm not working on that right now. How is this related to me? And the answer was, well, you're the closest thing we have to a Postgres expert. Can you recover this? And the recovery process turned out to be difficult because there weren't any PG dump backups being made of it. And, that's interesting because what backups did we have? And the answer was rsync, rolling across a live database's on-disk file system and dropping that on a remote machine. It turns out that is not a valid Postgres backup. Turns out it turns out a live Postgres database actually has transactions, and retrieving those from a live rsync rolling across it is hard. It is not impossible. There are an awful lot of options. You have to tell Postgres to just take whatever it finds, make as much sense of it as it can, and load it. And that recovered us. And it was good enough. I don't know if it was actually all of the data that was in there, but it was within a day or two. So it was sort of like, okay, fine. It's better than re-entering thousands and thousands of access points by hand.
Yeah.
And that was great. So one job later, okay, 4 jobs later, but all still for the same university, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how do we deal with the backup of databases in the context of a whole bunch of reasonably complicated PHP applications that are speaking to MySQL. 2 pieces showed up in my head eventually. First was backups get used for 2 completely different things. Backup case number 1 is your data center burnt down. Backup case number 2 is somebody deleted all of your data. We assume by accident, but with the wonder of ransomware, it might be intentional. One of the things I did in my strategy was isolate those 2 cases by very different backup strategies. To deal with my data center burns down, I now execute a backup strategy which does a PG dump operation on some sort of regular basis. You pick that for the customer and what their data environment is, spool that into or serialize that into a file, and then blow that file to whatever your safety out of building, out of region, out of whatever storage spot is. Great, wonderful. That's a reasonably expensive operation because serializing all of your data down takes a while. and it can impact performance. So you don't want to do that more than once, in my case, typically once a day in the middle of the night when nobody's looking at the stuff. On the other hand, people deleting the entire system happens at a concerning basis. The solution I came up for that was using Triton snapshots. I've linked it before in the past. I wrote a piece of software which uses Cloud API to trigger snapshots of the underlying machines on a rolling basis. So I, on a substantial number of my machines, have 90 days worth of rolling snapshots of once per hour sitting inside of the snapshot tree. LS takes a little while there, but the upside is for the low cost of a little bit of disk space, I have the ability to walk back and roll back the entire machine to a previous state. And what I have learned, this is not conclusive, but I have never had it stab me in the foot yet, is that MySQL, or more precisely, let me try the statement again. The snapshots happen on sync boundaries, and MySQL can recover the database files from that sync boundary. So it's worked out. And yes, I have repeatedly had to roll back entire systems, and works great. Customers are extremely happy, and I have resolution of about 1 hour to figure out what they did. End of story.
Manatee works similar to that because there's a Manatee snapshotter service that makes hourly backups. Manatee is Postgres in this case. But the real trick there is as long as the database will write consistently to disk and not have like partial writes or anything, then taking snapshots of the disk will be entirely safe because you have like the atomic transaction either committed to disk or not committed to disk. So you're never in a state where you have like a partial transaction, which is where the corruption would come from. And databases really like need to be able to handle that kind of thing anyway, because you never know when you're going to have a power loss. And if you've got like partial writes going on in those cases, you can have severe data corruption. And MySQL hasn't always been great about that in the past, but it's a lot better these days than it used to be. And like that's basically like the strategy that we have with Manatee, is that we take those ZFS snapshots so that if the system goes down unexpectedly, or if you've got an HA Manatee environment and you accidentally delete one of them, it's no big deal. You have to go on an accidental deletion rampage in order to ruin your Manatee there. But if you actually manage to accidentally delete 3 of the most important zones in the entire system, I have a hard time believing that it's an accident at that point.
I would also point at the work of AFR for if you feel any need to start understanding distributed systems and how they fail to work correctly. Every single one of his posts regarding Jepsen is a masterclass in distributed systems thinking. Terrifying what he locates inside of these systems.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a whole series on named after that song "Call Me Maybe." It was like you might ask for your data to be written, and like maybe it will, and maybe it won't.
Yeah, and that was explicit. The the tool Jepsen is quite literally here's a number, store it maybe.
Right, and it's called Jepsen because the artist of that song is Carly Rae Jepsen.
Look at you, that pop knowledge. Jasper, you said you had a story as well?
Yeah, I got one for Postgres as well. I got bitten by a bug in Postgres. and basically by my own assumption. For some reason, I thought one day before I would go on a two-week holiday, well, maybe I should do some maintenance on the database. I don't know why I thought that, but I guess that was my first mistake. So I dropped a large schema which hadn't been used for a while, and everything went well. And I thought to myself, well, this schema also used a lot of large objects, which at the time were fashionable. So I better clean those up as well. So I'll just hop over to the terminal, run vacuum low. Here we go. Well, that's a lot of objects, but whatever. I guess it was a big schema or something. Vacuum low found a bunch, so should be good, right? So I go on with my day to day, and 5 minutes later, someone calls me and says, "The system doesn't work anymore." And I'm thinking, what? What are they talking about? So I go to the system and I see the system is not working. I think, what could that be? And then I see the logs, and I see in the logs that it's um, the application is dying because Postgres is giving an error on some table, some join it can't make because it can't retrieve some column, which is also a large object, which was actually a character large object, right? So for text above 1,000 characters in older versions of Postgres, you need to store those as character large objects. Nowadays, you can just store them in a tuple, but back then you couldn't do that. And slowly it started to dawn on me that the vacuum low utility had cleaned up far more than just the orphaned large objects. So at that point, I started to panic a bit, but luckily I had a very well-defined and monthly tested backup solution with point-in-time recovery. So I should have been able to just recover all the stuff with like a 1 minute time loss window. So I hopped over to a terminal and I initiated the backup recovery procedure, which was monthly tested. Unfortunately for me, it was about, well, a month, as in 29 days ago. And what the backup solution did was it would make a full backup weekly, or no, daily. It would make a full backup daily, and then it would make incremental backups of the walls, so the write ahead logs. But what had happened was that the tool would test if it could do a complete recovery to see if it had a full backup solution. But what had happened was something had gone wrong with the full backups. But because it was making backups of the walls, it still thought it could make a full recovery, so no alerting went off. But unfortunately, if you try to replay like 29 days of walls, there is bound to be some corruption somewhere, and sure there was. Halfway it would just choke on some wall with corruption, and when I fixed that, it would choke on the next one. And at that point I was becoming a bit stressed out, so I called it a day and handed it over to my coworkers and said, well, I'm going on holiday. You guys fix it tomorrow, because in the car I had already come up with the solution, but because I was so stuck in a sort of scenario mode, I hadn't actually considered that the vacuum low thing only runs on the local node. So all the other nodes in the cluster still had their large objects because it's a separate storage from the actual Postgres data. So the only thing which was needed was to promote another node to primary, and that fixed the problem. But because I was so stuck in, oh, something has happened to the database, we're going to recover with a backup. Oh, the backup is broken. We're going to try to recover the backup. I never thought about, well, I can just promote another database because that one still has the large objects. So a combination of bug and my own tunnel vision caused that one, I would say.
Tunnel vision is a serious threat to doing recovery.
Yeah.
I've been there. I get it.
Yeah, I was seriously stressed out at that point. I can tell you that. I can laugh about it now, but at that point,
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
I'm just gonna run out of the building screaming and never return.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, there's always, it's good if you can go back and laugh on it, and then obviously know and learn. Obviously, I'm not going to do that again type situation, or if it's
Right.
something really complicated, like, you're like, okay, I need to change the processes, right? Like okay, I just need to have a better process when it comes to backing up or doing things before a vacation or something like that, right? So, or deploying on a Friday.
Yeah. Yeah. I was doing, I worked at a cement company long ago, and I wasn't the one that caused the outage this time, but I apparently was part of it. It used to be AIX. I worked on AIX, and we were doing a disaster recovery test. So my partner was at Iron Mountain in Philadelphia working on the AIX machine, bringing it up, and he called me and said, "Hey, take a look at this, or can I get access to this?" And we facilitated some access. And when he went to reboot the disaster recovery machine, he happened to be on production and rebooted production AIX server, which took like, I don't know, 45 minutes to reboot or something ridiculous like that.
Yikes.
And this was a fairly large cement company, many billions of dollars, and trucks are like waiting for their bill ladings at the cement facilities. So it was not a small outage,
Wow.
but another scenario, right? Just don't change on Friday. Know the window you're into.
Yeah, exactly. You might need, especially if you need support from somebody else, right? And you're like, you don't want to be stuck alone.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, the amount of time in my life, I adopted a policy of when I was about to type a command that was exciting of any form, that the first thing I did was I sat on my hands and reviewed what terminals I had open in front of me and where they were before I even got to typing the command, and then carefully disconnected myself from the stuff that I didn't need to be connected to for the exciting commands. This came from a history of doing network operations where it was sort of like, yeah, it turns out some devices have a commit sequence and some devices are immediate.
Mhm.
And immediate devices are really good at cutting yourself off from the connection. If you may in fact alter the connection you are talking to the device over, at which point you're sending somebody in a truck 12 hours away.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, just a few weeks ago here, we're working with some of our junior sysadmins, and, we're restoring a database, and they just haven't had that, white sweat, terrible feeling come over them before that makes you never forget these moments. And until you've had those, like, it's hard to relay that experience, but, we do the best we can by, making them feel like they did something wrong. But no, I'm just kidding. We do. Actually, that's not a bad idea, right? We trick them into getting those experiences so they
There you go. There you
never
go.
have to experience them.
I
But,
mean,
just
to be absolutely clear, that was so I'm going to reference military history at this point, but that's literally the reason the Top Gun school exists, was to get fighter pilots through their first 10 fights where their survivability went wildly up after they've gone through 10 fights in the air. Same story. How do you get senior sysadmins answer junior sysadmins who have extremely bad days?
Right.
that's right. You're right. Absolutely. And that's
Yeah, like
all of these
you can't
experiences.
truly be a senior sys engineer unless you have issued a command followed by sheer panic.
Yeah.
True story.
I mean, I was gonna say quickly, the worst I've done is, I mean, so far I should say, but we luckily have our, like, the docs.triton data center is on a Git workflow, which is nice because I happen to have like a character that was out of bounds or something like that, like the syntax is wrong in a markdown file, and it takes down the whole website. It sets off alerts. But luckily, we have a Git workflow, so all I have to do is hit revert, and the site comes back online.
Yeah.
So there's just like some it's like a panic moment a little bit, like I took the website down, but luckily there's an easy reverse button in that case, and that's like kind of a testament to having a good workflow even on like a website. That's why I like setting up a Git workflow for a website deploying, is that you can always revert the commit. So
Oh, that was supposed to be a private message, Brian. Sorry.
Yeah.
Quickly remove access.
Yeah. So, but there's just like, like you said, learning from things, like you do something or, luckily, the best thing to do, of course, is learn from others' mistakes, learn from your own as well, but learning from others is a big thing as well.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions, or does anybody have any other stories they want to talk about? I think there was maybe a question. DJ Hyper, if you wanted to ask your question. I can also pull it up here. Just 1 second. I just wanted to get to the Discord other window. Just 1 second. So he had a question. He asked earlier, like shutting down a Triton cluster optimally and quickly, but really, like, if you don't have a situation like a power outage that might outlast a battery backup and maybe no ZFS intent log in a node. Is there like a
Right.
good way to do that?
So, yeah, the shutdown process doesn't matter at all. Actually, your guest instances might care. But as far as Triton itself is concerned, the shutdown process doesn't matter. You could go yank the cord, and it's completely fine. The boot up sequence, so after the US East 1 reboot at Joyent, we had some discussions about like, okay, what do you do when you have all three of your head nodes went offline and you need to boot up? And so Booter now has built into it a cache that is able to boot compute nodes without having any Manatee online at all. So if Booter cannot contact Manatee to get its data, then it will fall back to the cache automatically, and that should allow you to bring up your second two nodes. So the first thing would be boot the head node up all the way. Then Booter will be online enough to get a second node up, and then you boot your next node, which would be one of your Manatee instances. And as long as your Manatee is not frozen, then those two will boot up together. One is primary, one is secondary, regardless of what state it was in before, which was primary, sync, async. None of that would matter. Those two nodes will come up as the primary and the sync. And then after that, it doesn't matter the order of any of the compute nodes. You could boot up all of your tenant nodes, and then finally your third head node, compute node, which has your third Manatee on it. Or you could boot up your third Manatee first, and then all the compute nodes. In summary, the boot up sequence is primary head node, secondary head node, and then everything else in any order.
Thank you. I want to mention one more thing too, in the vein of disaster, accidents, things like that. Was we've talked about this before, but like ransomware, right? One of the cool things about, depending on your setup, but ZFS in a lot of cases has been a great tool
in things like ransomware, where if of course if everything is really really encrypted with that software, you might still be hosed, but um, if you have like a certain set of backups, or I think I was watching a use case where a guy, he was I forgot what hypervisor he may have been using, but he was using Windows VMs, but underlying he was using ZFS, and so he was able to just roll back to some snapshots that he had um, if these Windows VMs were hit by ransomware. And so ZFS is a great tool for a lot of different things when it comes to protecting your data, of course, and even in the case of ransomware, which generally Windows systems are the ones that are targeted the most because that's going to give you the most the biggest target. We've seen hospitals, other large institutions that were crippled um, by ransomware. Somebody opens up an email and it spreads through SMB shares, and you're seeing just like a huge, medical operation just come to a complete halt. And even if they pay off the Bitcoin ransom, they're still held hostage. But um, if you can protect yourself against those things with, the correct setup, you can minimize the surface damage by um, thinking about that particular attack vector. Um, I'm not an architect of that, but that was just one thing I've read a few different places of people utilizing ZFS for that purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, well we've come to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, protecting against attacks like that is an entirely different conversation around security. So that'll be for another time.
Yeah, it just popped into my head just because I was like, just like hearing about some things where ZFS came into play, and we talked about it a little bit, I think, on one of the ZFS conversations. But um,
Yeah,
you've
and
just
it
seen
it came up
attacks.
on the chat just a moment ago as well. Someone
Yeah.
asked something related to that.
Yeah, so because that's we talked about accidents we've made, but there's also of course been like Jasper, you were joking about cleaning up other people's messes. You just get somebody with the wrong, somebody who has enough access clicks on the wrong email, or they do something they're not supposed to do, not on purpose, of course, but um, is how these things happen. Like, I'll just give a quick example. My uncle is an attorney, and um, of course, I'm like his IT guy, so he calls me when something doesn't work, and he actually got bit by a ransomware. His computer was completely encrypted, needed to pay a Bitcoin ransom. I think he ended up paying. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he ended up paying the ransom. I can't remember if they unlocked it or not, but I was like, okay, here's for a small single um, practitioner, have this external hard drive that you back all your documents up and unplug it when you're done. Was my kind of answer to that. But um, it's just not surprising how many people get targeted by scammers and people wanting to do this, institutions and individuals. So um, as far as like disasters go, that's one that I think is usually at the top of people's mind. In fact, my wife's company sends out like fake um, phishing emails, right, to see if they click on them. If you click on it, then they're like, "Oh, you
Right.
clicked on this, and now we're going to educate you." So um, it does take some education, when there's people who are like operations, non-developers, and things like that, that the IT and tech people have to also educate and protect against. But they're not the same white knuckle situations as issuing the wrong command in the wrong terminal. Um, like you said, having multiple windows open, don't know, oops, I typed that command into the wrong node, things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is cool to like learn from our mistakes, and just as we said, a senior developer or senior operations, or um, SRE type situations where it's like, yeah, I've been through the fire, I've been burned, I got some scars, but it helps me be understand what to do in certain situations. And of course, like I also wanted to mention too was that just going back to that topic, the person who was fired at Amazon, because I've
Yeah.
I've read some situations about that, and it's like that disappoints me because um, that means there was a process breakdown in place, and axing the person, like,
Right.
it just is not. It doesn't sit well with me because they're going to be like really
Yeah.
fearful.
And it's not their fault at all because they
Yeah.
didn't implement the process that got them in that situation in the first place.
Yeah, and like obviously, I think you know, obviously they needed to go and fix something, but I like that. That to me, like if somebody does something malicious, that's one thing. But um, if you're like a junior dev and somehow you or whatever database operator and you have access to something, um, maybe there's like there's definitely process in place where it's like, okay, you have access to this production database, you need to do this or double check this, but like giving somebody who's
Yeah.
like brand new and then being like, oh, you're fired because you didn't know that. Even if they were not,
Well,
even if they were
yep.
experienced, right, and just came to the company, it's a whole new set of processes at a new company.
Yeah. Part of the onboarding process was to make a copy of this stuff on your own workstation. And it was like something like they were logged into the production one to like compare like the state of things or something like that. Um, and then they're like, okay, so we're done with this activity. Like, go ahead and destroy this stuff. And so he did, but then like because he was so new and like the Amazon stuff is so complex the way they do things, it's like kind of ridiculous. But like he lost track of where he was, and his onboarding buddy wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, like it just the good the stories of like we talked about with the Giant one where it's like okay, we're in this with you, like we're because you gotta understand that person is probably going through some crazy stuff in their mind, especially if they really are scared about getting fired or something. But um, if
right,
if
and
they don't,
in most cases, a disaster like this isn't even their fault.
right, and it also it luckily they're able to recover, but it's something you look at and you're like, okay, this person now has gone through this and we've improved the process, but like we said, they've become probably a better operator or whatnot because of it, because they're like, okay, I've made this mistake, now I know to double check this and things like that. Learning from the mistakes, right? Learning from improving
Yeah,
processes, look at the things we can improve on or fix rather than like let's just axe somebody. And I understand it in certain situations, but to hear that out of like a bigger company is kind of disappointing in a way, but hopefully there's been some process improvements in that particular situation. I'm sure there is, but yeah, like you have
yeah, I have
to
no
have some
idea.
things we don't know,
It
but it's
was
like
more than 10 years ago, so
yeah, I'm sure they've changed something, but yeah, it's like you know um sometimes like you said, trial by fire or but yeah, just learning from mistakes. And so, and also I think you need to be able to you don't want to encourage people to break things, but you do want to encourage people to learn from their mistakes, or um, not be so fearful
right.
that you don't do anything or lock yourself up, but encourage people to be like, okay, we're gonna get you to a place where you understand these processes and what to do and what not to do. And um, you're gonna make some mistakes, that's okay, we all make mistakes, but let's improve
Yeah,
the
and
process for the next person.
humans are fallible. Even the most well-reviewed change procedure ahead of time um, isn't always going to be run exactly the way that it was supposed to. You
Yeah.
know, people can still make a mistake.
Yeah.
So like there's process improvements to a point, and when a mistake happens, like it's good to look at the process and say like, okay, was there a breakdown of the process? Like, was there something that can be improved there? Um, but like sometimes it's just like, oops, I pasted it to the wrong window. Like, there's not really anything you can do
Yeah.
um, uh, to protect against something like that.
Yeah.
So
But I think generally from what I've read, it's like it's like it's not usually coming down to like your
automatically fired, but it's like, hey, this is what we've learned from it, and use the people
Right.
like, yeah, I'm a better operator, I'm a better developer because of it, like we just talked about, and hopefully, you can pass that knowledge on to the next person when you become the senior and there's a junior. Hey, I dropped a table one time, and I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
this: don't do it, don't do that. But like we've all, telling people and showing that you're human as well. Like I've made mistakes, helps people be more comfortable. Like, hey, I've messed stuff up, but we were able to fix it, or here's what we changed in the future. And that's another thing, is just passing on the knowledge and the education. I think is important for juniors and people coming just into the business, and like, hey, just like Nick was talking about, with the junior guys, and like they may not know that situation, but of course having them educated on it just helps them be better employees themselves. So
Yeah.
So, C. Rust asked if there was anything about this bug I've been chasing with iPixie for the last
yes.
couple of weeks. And I have a comment which is not actually about the bug chase, but about a more relevant edge around disaster recovery.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the reasons that I found myself in this bug hunt is because I make a point of going and exercising the sort of operations where we might have a problem on a regular basis. Example in this case, rebooting compute nodes. If I didn't restart compute nodes unless I had a darn good reason to, the compute nodes could run for months or years without a restart, and I would not have discovered this change until later. On the same note,
Right.
I also exercise my disaster recovery operations for certain core systems and what I run on a 6-month basis. Every 6 months, I run a copy of GitLab internally as a Beehive VM on Ubuntu. Every 6 months, I do a complete respin from my backups. So we take the entire thing down and I restore from the most recent backup, proving that I can do a full restoration of that GitLab system from backup every 6 months. That's a safety measure. That means that not only do you have backups, but you have backups that work. An awful lot of people
Yes.
never do that. They
Yes.
take backups, but never see or never do the recovery operation. And I've learned that anything short of about once every 6 months isn't enough for you to actually have the process in your head. So that's broadly the bug I'm hunting is just a bug. But the problem here is if you don't exercise the stuff, you don't even find them.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the backup. Like, yeah, can our we have backups. Can we actually restore for them? Because I've seen many situations, um, where, yeah, it was like we had a backup, but we never tried restoring it, and you've only done the process one way, you haven't come the other way. So then, when it comes time to do it and implement it, and it may not work, and you're hosed. And so that's a really great thing to mention, right? Is that every so often do that, because we do have um, customers that we've worked with in the past, like, nearly refuse to reboot compute nodes. Um, and so, like, for instance, obviously some updates, especially to PIs, right? You have to reboot a compute node to bring it to the latest PI, and so they'll hit a bug, and and they want a hot patch, or um, they want some other solution, or it's like, hey, we've actually already fixed this like months ago, but you need to actually reboot. And it was like they won't you know do it. And it's like, no, this is a situation where, like, you have to be comfortable at some point to reboot a node. Like, you need to have that in your plan, because there may be a critical fix or something that you need. Like, uptime is great, like, and if you can continue, with as much uptime as you can get, of course, but it's always good to see what happens if you do reboot. You can't be so scared of it that you never do it. So that's a really good point. Well, we're a little bit over time, so a hardware upgrade, yes. So yeah, I appreciate you guys joining and participating. We'll be, of course, meeting in a couple weeks here. So
I'll come out with the topic here soon, and hope to get great participation like we did today, because it's really, it's about everybody sharing and hearing from you guys about stuff is really important, because I like to hear projects you're working on, things you've experienced with Triton especially, and things that you may be contributing to and all that. So really appreciate the participation and conversation today, and we'll try to keep this kind of the same format where we give a little bit much more time to participants. I don't like to just present at you guys, of course. So I appreciate the interaction. So thank you very much, everybody, and special thanks to Nick, because he had this idea like over a month ago, like he said, and I just took notes, and I was like, that's super cool. That's a super cool idea. So I'm glad we got to execute it. So we'll continue to do that. And of course, if you have an idea or for a topic or something, put it in Discord, and I'm sure we'll get to hopefully address it. So if you have ideas and stuff you want to talk about, please share it, because sometimes I'm thinking of an idea, but I want to do what you guys want to talk about, and of course have things that are interesting to you. So please let me know if you have an idea or things like that. If you have any questions too, of course, around this topic, jump it in Discord, and we will we'll address it. So appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next office hours, and in between that, we'll see you on Discord and our other channels. Thank you.
Everybody.